The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California. I'm right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, and I do one thing. I provide interesting guests on this podcast. Amazingly so. I have some terrific people that I communicate with on a regular basis. And one of them is Alan Blumkin. Alan, welcome back to the airwaves.
Thank you, Ralph. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. It's for me, it's a test of my intellect, just keeping up with you and your sports knowledge. And I'm very appreciative of having you. You have made a name for yourself on this network by appearing on virtually all of our shows at one time or another. And the most I'm impressed is what you have going with David Nemec.
It's a pleasure to do. It's a pleasure to do the podcast with him. We both feed off each other, and we all have have our own specialties of knowledge. And he's written 1 million books on basically the 19th century. And I'm very, very thankful he's a friend of mine.
I'm thankful for both of you because, like you say, you offset each other beautifully. And it isn't just on that show. It's on every podcast show that we do. It's just a pleasure to have you. And I'm not going to compliment you anymore because I'll give you a big swell head. So let's get on to what I wanted to talk about. I pick up Facebook today, and the picture of Yogi Berra is all over the place. I didn't have time. It's an anniversary of his firing.
Oh God, yeah, that was a terrible day in the history of the Yankees. It was all the work of Ralph Houck.
Yes.
Ralph Houck had been the manager from 61 to 63. He got the job after the Yankees fired Casey Stengel after 1960. They didn't want to lose Houck. And Houck, for the 3 years that he managed from 1961 through 1963, became a beloved figure to the Yankee players. And then the general manager, Roy Hamey, who had succeeded George Weiss, had to leave for reasons of health. And topping the dough, Webb promoted Houck to general manager, which was a role that he was totally unsuited for. And I think somebody wrote, and I think this is true, that Houck resented Yogi because what Yogi was catching in the late 40s and early 50s, Ralph Houck was the third-string catcher behind Yogi and Charlie Silvera. He would play maybe 5 games a year.
Right. Tough to play behind Yogi. And Charlie Silvera was a terrific backup for many years. And I heard a rumor once that he was the illegitimate son of Casey Stengel. And and Casey kept him around. And if you look at them facially, it's unreal. So, but he earned it. And when Yogi went down, he stepped in. he didn't play much, but he was steady and he had a lot of rings. And the reason he ended up going to the Cubs is because, if I'm not mistaken, that was when they brought up Elston Howard.
That was the year. Yeah, he went up there after 56.
Right.
Charlie Silvera went to the Cubs after 1956. Because after 1956, Yogi's offensive production went down. Excuse me. And okay. And Yogi's production went down, and there's a great biography that came out titled Yogi a couple of years ago by John Pissar. And it was a funny story. Somebody, I bought the book. Somebody says, why are you buying a biography of Yogi? You know everything. No, I didn't. By a long shot. And the book was tremendous. I praised him. I was friends with him on Facebook. I'm friends with him on Facebook, and I praised the book to the world.
Hither and yon.
So anyway, getting back to
what did you learn from the book first that you didn't know?
George Weiss was the general manager for most of Yogi's playing career, and George Weiss was an SOB. Now, he would always try to lowball the players. I mean, general managers like Branch Rickey and Weiss would never be able to, Frank Lane would never be able to operate the way they did back then. They wouldn't be able to operate now the way they did back then. And Yogi, I don't know whether Weiss got a cut for all the money that they thought they saved, but Carmen and Yogi would establish a salary. And after 1 or 2 years, Weiss would grant Berra what he asked for.
Okay.
Because
so they had a good working relationship.
Well, he was that valuable by then. So anyway, getting back to the hiring of Yogi as a manager after 1963, Yogi had never managed on any level before. And not only did Yogi get the job, but Houck fired Johnny Sain, the pitching coach, who the pitchers swore by, and named Whitey Ford, who was still active as a combination pitcher and coach. And despite all this, they won the pennant with Yogi. With a team that was starting to show age. And they took the Cardinals to a 7th game in the World Series. Then he fires Yogi and brings in Johnny Keane, who had managed the Cardinals, to the World Series. And Keane was hated by the Yankees. I mean, Jim Bowden addresses Keane in Ball 4 quite a bit. And he said Keane... King took them to spring training in 1965 and made the comment that everybody would have to fight for a job. All the stuff that didn't go over very well with the veterans.
Right. And this is a team that was a dynasty. You're talking to this team.
And they wound up in 6th place.
Individual players.
And finished 10th, which was last of the 10-team league in 1966. And King died of a heart attack in early 1967. And Hal came back after King was fired in 1966. Hal took over again, but the relationship that Hal had with the players was never the same. Boughton hated Hal because Boughton had a season in 1963 where he was 21-7. And he wanted $20,000 and Houck wouldn't go above $18,000 and threatened to fine Boughton $500 every day he was out of camp.
Which is obviously illegal.
Yeah, so he wound up signing for the $18,000.
Right.
Yeah. This is what this was like back then. Yeah, this is why now, when they're paying these guys $40-50 million a year, the owners reap what they sowed for so many years. But,
it wasn't just the Yankees. The Dodgers' Branch Rickey was incredibly tight-fisted with his money because he had a deal with the Dodgers that there was a certain amount that they were willing to pay. Anything below that, he got to keep.
Yeah,
so,
the greatest comment about Rickey, anti-Rickey, was Slaughter when Rickey was the general manager of the Cardinals before he went to the Dodgers. And Slaughter said about Rickey, he says he'd go into the vault to get you a nickel change.
He reminds me of Jack Benny, the old Jack Benny show, where Rochester would open the vault for him, and I mean that's a penny pinching guy, or the image of a penny pinching guy. I don't think Jack Benny was that.
No, he was a character.
He was a character.
Yeah, he was a character, yeah.
But these guys weren't characters, and they were acting out on what they had as a ace in the hole. No place else these guys could go. And if they didn't like it, stuff it. They'd send you back to the minors and you spend your career there. It was the reason, I say the reason things are the way they are salary-wise is that players are making up for what happened in the past.
Yeah, the only two times before free agency, there's only 2 times in the 20th century where salaries increased, and one was when the American League was founded in 1901, and they had the war that ended in 1903 when the 2 leagues settled, and made peace, and then in 1914 and 1915 there was a third league called the Federal League. And players, star players, who all threatened to jump, signed very big contracts. That's one of the things that happened with the Black Sox is that Eddie Collins was on the A's, and he was given a big contract for the time. We're talking 1914. For the time, which he carried over to the White Sox when he was sold there. And it was like a lot more than any of the the players who turned out to be the Black Sox were making.
Right.
So he was hated by the ones who fixed the series.
I take it that the players devoted a lot of energy into knocking Comiskey, and he was probably responsible for it.
Yeah. And once the Federal League collapsed after 1915, it was bought out. More specifically, the players who had gotten the big contracts for the time, got the contracts, but the rest of the players that they reduced to pre-1914 levels, and then the owners would make a justification. They said in the 1930s, when Jimmy Fox, for example, would have a tremendous year during the Depression, says, well, you can be on a breadline,
right?
And then the players who were there during World War II says you can be the Army making $50 a month, possibly getting shot at. So they used any excuse to keep the reserve. You can do a whole program on the history of the reserve, of course. But anyway, getting back to Yogi, and then after Yogi left, and Casey Stengel, of course, was managing the Mets at that point. The Mets signed Yogi, and he coached there until he succeeded Gil Hodges, who passed away in April of 1972, and he won a pennant with the 73 Mets.
And when Yogi first went to the Mets, it was as a player, and he combined with Warren Spahn for the oldest battery in history. And it was, as an original Met fan, it was a touch of class to get those guys together, even though they were well beyond their superstardom. It was back in the days when a player retained his glory.
Well, the thing is, Yogi only played 4 games for the Mets in 1965.
Well,
2 for 9 in 4 games. And Warren Spahn, who had a great sense of humor, they mentioned to him in Berra, he said, not only we're the oldest, we're the ugliest.
A self-effacing guy, but a realist.
Yogi Berra, as a personality, did not like to talk about himself. I mean, there's tons and tons of sites on YouTube. All you have to do is go in and put Yogi Berra search. You'll get 1 million hits. And there was one where he actually talked about his service in World War II, which he really didn't like to talk about very much. He was on one of the boats that he was in the Navy, one of the boats that carried the troops onto the beaches in Normandy. And, yeah.
He was like guys like from that era, Hank Bauer, all these guys came out of the war as war heroes, and they still had to deal with the reserve clause.
Oh, yeah.
So it was horrible. It was just in the 50s when it was a boom time for the economy. And a lot of these guys ended up not so well financially.
Well, basically,
after they retired.
I have a copy of Peter Goldenbach's hardcover book, Dynasty. And in it I have almost every player who was contributed to the 1953 team, which was the 5 straight. I have Yogi, Rizzuto, Mantle, Ford, Bauer, Woodling, Rashi, Reynolds, Lopez. I have Joe Collins, Tommy Byrne. The only 2 I couldn't get with
Don't forget about Hal Hesse's favorite player, Johnny Mize.
Yeah, I have Johnny Mize. I have Johnny Sane. The only 2 I couldn't ever get were Jerry Coleman and Bob Cazava. But I got the rest of them. And Yogi Berra is one of those people. They mentioned him and Stan Musial and Brooks Robinson. There are people that nobody ever has anything bad to say about.
Right.
And I did a couple of posts on the Jim Howard's group, my friend Jim Howard's groups. I did one on the 7th game of 1956 when Berra hit 2 home runs off Newcomb. And the Yankees revenged 1955. And Newcomb started hitting the source after that and was never the same. He was coming off a year where he won Cy Young and MVP in the National League. And Berra was a tremendous clutch hitter in the I also did a dissertation in a Facebook group called Corsair Tales. It's a pirate history group, because I was in Forbes Field when Mazeroski hit the home run. A friend of mine and I snuck in. And it's a long story. And Berra, the Pirates were winning 4-2 in the bottom of the fifth, and Berra hit a 3-run homer to put them ahead. And then in the ninth inning,
Hal Smith was in that.
Hal Smith hit the home run in the eighth. And Berra came up with Mantle on first and McDougal on third. And Berra hit a shot that Rocky Nelson, who was playing first base, made a stab of. That's when Mickey Mantle dove back into first base, and Gil McDougal's a pinch runner playing his last game, scores from the third to tie the game up. And I asked Dick Roth when I interviewed him in 1985, what would have happened if Dick Stewart had been playing first base instead. And Groth says to me, let's not go there. But he was a tremendous clutch player. And he was absolutely, even managers like Paul Richards of the White Sox and the Orioles said that he was the player they most feared coming in the late innings of the game. And he was also, when he first came up, he always could hit. And but he was a terrible catcher. And then when Casey Stengel took over in 1949, he brought in Bill Dickey to coach, especially to coach Berra. And he turned Berra within a year or two. He turned Berra into one of the best defensive catchers and pitch callers of all time. And it took a while until Berra was ready as a catcher for Rashi, Reynolds, Lopat, and all the other veteran pitchers to trust him. And Casey Stengel came to call him my assistant manager.
I was surprised when Wes Westrom got the job instead of Berra when Casey retired. I didn't know why. I couldn't
Maybe
make heads or tails of it.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably true. Hey, I'm not a stats guy, but I'm going to give you a stat. Yogi Berra struck out like 38 times a year for a power hitter.
He struck out 414 times in his career. In 1950, when he hit 322, he struck out 12 times in 549 at bats. A lot of striking out was looked upon as very, very unfavorably back then. Now it's you just had the great Kyle Schwarber of the Phillies hit 47 home runs, driving 104 runs, score over 100 runs, and bat 197.
Incredible. We don't know how many times he walked, though. What was his on-base percentage?
His on-base percentage wasn't bad. But you get the Joey Gallo. I don't want to go into Joey Gallo. It's a waste of breath. But the thing is that strikeouts are accepted. And some of these people who are into this analytics crap believe that Dave Kingman should be a Hall of Famer.
Well, please.
That's enough
and
of
I
that.
But I want to tell you something about Dave Kingman. When he first came up with the 71 Giants, I was there a lot at the Stick. And it was the year of the Fox, Charlie Fox. And Charlie brought in Spire and Tito Fuentes as a double play combination. And Horace Stoneham said, if they don't make it, you're out of a job. And Charlie Fox told them they'll make it. But I digress. Dave Kingman was as fast a runner going from first to third as anybody in baseball. He was a terrific athlete when he first came up. He was a pitcher in college. I think it was Washington State or something like that. But whatever it was, he was a terrific athlete. And he became just one-dimensional. And that was sad. But he too was quite a character. Not in the great way, but he was. Tell me something again. I interrupted you when you were about to answer. What did you learn from that autobiography?
It was a biography, Yogi? Not an autobiography.
A biography. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and how Berra was very generous with his time and very generous to charities. And there's also a book that came out a couple of years ago where Dale Berra came out with a book called My Father, Yogi Berra. And Dale Berra had a problem with drugs. And Yogi was ready to read him out of the family until he cleaned up his act. Once he cleaned up his act. Really? And he did, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I remember the story about Yogi saying the Venetian guy, you can tell it better than I do, the blind salesman was there or something like that. And Yogi says, tell him we gave it to the office.
Yeah.
How much did Joe go out to?
I was at 2 meetings at the museum over the years, Sabre meetings. And the first one, Dale Berra spoke. And he said, let's get this out of the way right now. And he discussed the whole situation with the drugs. And the second one, they had Larry Berra Jr. and a couple of other people. They had Elson Howard's widow, and all of a sudden Carmen Berra walks in, and she was she was terrific. I asked her, because Yogi, by that time, he was with the whole business when he basically told Steinbrenner to go to hell after he was fired. 16 games into the season in 1985, he wouldn't come back for 14 years to Yankee Stadium. And I was there that day, the day he came back. I was there with a couple of friends of mine. And they gave him, the place was going crazy. And Don Larson threw the first pitch. And David Cohn pitched the perfect game that day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I saw.
Hey, tell us the story of.
I've got a couple of Carmen Berra. She told 2 stories. Once she got an anniversary card from him that says, "Your husband, Yogi Berra." And the other time, they were at some affair with Rachel Robinson. So Rachel asked Carmen if she could have a dance with Yogi. So Carmen said, sure. Carmen called Yogi over and says, whatever you do, don't bring up that play.
That's the story I was asking for.
And it got to the point when he was doing autographs or card shows, which have also disappeared. There used to be tons of them. There are very, very few right now anymore. Anytime somebody gave him a picture of the Robinson play, he would put down Yogi Berra, and then underneath he would put down he was out.
Yeah, he argued from the heart that whether he was safe or out, Yogi believed he was out. He was
Yogi didn't lose his temper very often.
Right.
But he lost it on that one, yeah.
He lost it, right. I also want to tell you that, and Yogi was as quick coming out of the catcher's box, the batter's box, as any catcher in baseball.
He also did an incredible thing. I remember watching the first game of the 1953 World Series. And in the fifth inning, I think it was the fifth inning, the Dodgers had first and second and nobody out. And Charlie Dressen, who was, you could do a whole program on how inept he was, had the next two batters bunt. And Yogi threw both runners out of third.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Good example of what I was talking about. Alan, great show. We got it covered succinctly. And we honored a man, once again, that deserves honoring. If we had to do a show on him every 6 months, so be it.
I also want to mention before we go that when I see the old films on YouTube, World Series films or whatever, I still get chills out of watching him swing.
Right. Ferociously. And at bad balls.
Yeah.
Way out of the strike zone. And never struck out more than like 40 times a year. Incredible.
Because he once told Derek Jeter was swinging at bad balls, and he says, he said something that says, "The Yogi, you swung at bad balls," and Yogi said, "Yeah, but I hit him." Of course, his quotes are just unbelievable. And one of my favorites is when they asked him after the Mazeroski game in 1960 what happened. He said, "We made too many wrong mistakes."
Yeah.
And you dissect the quotes. He always said he didn't know how he said all this stuff, and he was. But most of them make sense. And he was given. I found out a couple in the book that he was given the nickname Yogi by the Giants. You probably remember this. They had a utility infielder for several years in the 50s named Bobby Hoffman.
Yes, one of the Soda twins, Todd and Hoffman.
Yeah, he grew up with Yogi Berra and Joe Garagiola in St. Louis, and he said after one youth game, he said he looks like a Yogi, and it just caught on. Yeah.
Oh, so that's how he was named.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
But if you get a chance, the biography is by John Pessah, Pessah. It's worth your time.
Okay, and I also want to say that 53 game in the World Series is on video on YouTube. So it's available, and YouTube is a blessing to me. I listen to a lot of old games on the radio, and just enjoy hearing the names.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there's something funny. In 1986, when the Mets were in the World Series, there was a museum of broadcasting, and they ran video scopes 2 days of the 6th and 7th games of the 1952 World Series. And it was packed. I went both days. It was packed, and people were rooting. This is 34 years after these games were played. And people were rooting for the Dodgers and the Yankees like these games were, that they were playing right then.
Baseball's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Thank you, Alan. We'll talk again really soon.
Okay.
Have a blessed Sunday.
When are you going to post this?
I will post it this evening.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll send you a link as I generally do.
Okay, because I have a few people who listen to this stuff.
Oh yeah, more than a few. Pam Henderson is one of them.
Yeah, and I have my friend in Massachusetts, who I've known since college, listens to all of them too.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure posting for just that reason. Alan, you're great. Thank you.
Okay, give my best to Tally.
I certainly will.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all, but I got Alan Blumkin to do my thinking for me. Love you, Alan. Be well.
You too. Bye-bye.
Adios and happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.